I'm back today with another tutorial showing you the experiment to repeat the experiment that we did in the last video, with using a couple of different methods to make background papers that you can use in your junk journals. So as I explained in the last video, if you hadn't seen that, I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. You might want to go and check that video out before you see this one, but if not, this is a standalone video on its own. We won't be using, as I explained in the last video, we won't be using the traditional method of working directly on the papers themselves to create our designs. Instead, we'll be using a sheet of plastic as our canvas, and with this method, we'll be applying the colors and making designs on the canvas first, and then placing the papers over the top to transfer the designs. The biggest benefit I see to this method is that if you don't like the design you created, you can simply wipe it away and start over again, and you haven't wasted any paper. So the plastic that I used, plastic sheeting that I use is this one here. It's one of those disposable tablecloths that you use, at parties or whatever, to cover your good tablecloths so they don't get soiled. You don't have to use this tablecloth in particular if you can't find it, but you do need something that has a smooth surface. It's mostly non-porous and it's not glossy. The non-porous part, it's non-porous for a while and then it starts seeping through to the background, so you may want something underneath to protect your work surface. So for the papers, you can use any kinds of papers, which the ones I used were mainly art papers, copy paper, ruled pages, parchment paper, that kind of thing. So in this fun little experiment, I'll be showing you 3 different methods, like I did in the last video, of how you can create some beautiful and interesting journal papers. And so the first method is about creating some general background papers by painting the colors onto the plastic canvas first, and then you apply the papers over the top, and that's the first method. The second method you'll be using is paintbrushes, and I have a selection here. So you'll be using paintbrushes to paint or draw some designs. So I've got a big one for background work, and then these other ones to do some more fine work, draw some lines and whatnot, make some marks. So that's those. And then the third method is where you'll be using some textured household items, and you'll be using them as stencils, and I have a selection of them here to show you. And this is just I only used what I had around the house. I didn't go out and get anything special. The things I've got are some lace and doilies and some mesh, and I'll leave, if I haven't said it before, I'll leave a list of the supplies in the description below. And of course we've got the good old bubble wrap, and these are a couple of placemats that I used. This one here is actually some felt, but anything with a design, open weave design on it will work. That's the main thing. And this one here is some broderie anglaise, and this one here is one of those non-stick mats, or a piece of non-stick mat. So they're just some of the things that you can use, find around your house, hopefully, to use as stencils. Make sure that when you do pick your stencils, whatever you're using isn't some precious item, because the colors, the chalks will stain these stencils. So for the colors now, we'll be using, these are water-soluble pastels. They're in the stick form. I don't know if they come in any other form or not, but I've only got a little supply of 12 here, but they were enough to do something. You can see they're a bit grubby now. So besides these, you'll want some spray bottle to spray the water, because we're using that quite a bit. Optionally, you can use some coffee dye. Of course, you want some water containers, and I think that's about all. So today, we'll be going through those 3 methods. I've already gone ahead and made the video, like I did in the last video, showing you how these 3 methods work to make the background pages, so that you can watch them without me babbling on, and I can concentrate on doing the demonstration and hopefully doing a good job of it. without having to try and talk at the same time. So just make sure you stick around to the end, where I'll come back and I'll reveal how the results turns out using these pastels. So once again, I'll stop talking and I'll let you sit back and enjoy the following demonstration, and then I'll be back with you at the end. I'm going to make several background pages, and how I do it is I spray the canvas with water and then I rub the chalks over the canvas using different colors, and then I place my paper on top and use a rolling pin to roll it out. With some of the pages I'll turn them over and do the other side as well. Some of the other pages I will just use my hand to rub the colors on and move the page around onto the canvas to spread those colors out. Using a rolling pin gives you a different effect, and also it transfers the color onto the back of the page and gives you you get a 2-for-1 deal, whereas when you use your hand to spread the color out, you're mainly only getting the color on one page and the pattern, but the two different methods often give you different results. The amount of water that you spray onto the canvas will determine how much of that color will transfer to your papers, and also how well blended those colors will be. For the first few sheets, I will use the crayons to make a background onto the canvas, and then I'll use a paintbrush to make some marks into the paint or the crayon. Some of them are more successful than others, as you'll see. Here I tried to do the peace sign, but I did it back to front. Then I make some leaves. I really like how these negative leaves impressions turned out on the pages. It looks a little bit like eco printing or eco dyeing. Here I'm just using a few sheets of a book page to mop up the last of those impressions. It didn't have great results, but it gave some interesting designs on the pages. As you see, my attempt to make dots on the page didn't turn out too well, the results. Yeah, I need to work on this method a little bit more uh, to see if I can get some better results. Here I'm using a scrap of tracing paper to mop up the rest of that colour. Now I'm going to do several mark making designs without the backgrounds, and to see how they work out. Some worked out better than others. With the leaf designs, I use the chalk pastels to draw on the designs, and then I sprayed some coffee dye over the top of it. It gave an interesting pattern. On the second sheet with the leaves, I don't actually show you, but I did sprinkle on some gold powder, and that's why you see the golds in the leaves. The first stencil I used from my stash is the curtain gauze. I placed a sheet of paper on the canvas, and then I put the gauze on top, and then I wet the gauze, spray some water on there to wet the gauze, and then I rub the chalk pastels over the top, and before applying the page I also sprayed on some coffee dye as well. The second stencil I'm using is the open weave cotton fabric, and I use it the same way I did with the first stencil. I'm now using the curtain fabric with the lace design on the bottom, and the first one is just on a plain sheet of copy paper. And the second one I'll spray some coffee dye on first before applying the chalk colours. I make several of these pages using the curtain lace and just varying the applications. Some I will use the coffee dye and some I won't. I'll just use the chalks. With the Brayer Anglais fabric, I spray on some coffee dye as well as some water before I transfer the pattern. With the felt placemat, I place a sheet of copy paper underneath, and then I decide to spray some coffee dye on top, and then I decide to go to town with all the color, using all the colors I can in my palette. Here I change the background page and put another one down, and then this time I decide to use some gold paint and see how that works. With the non-stick mat, you can see that you can get several transfers without having to reapply the chalk first. I found with the round placemat, it has one side is glossy and the other side is flat. And I found out that the chalks don't take too well to the glossy side, so I had to turn it over and use that side. Of course, you have to spray on water first and then apply the chalks over the top. The water helps to activate the color in the chalks to allow it to be able to transfer it to the paper. With the bubble wrap, I used the rolling pin to transfer the design to the paper, and you'll see that it gave a shadow effect, which I didn't mind. It also, I think it allowed the color to transfer much more brightly. Okay, now that they're all dry, it's time to show you how they all turned out. And of course, we'll start with I'll try and show you the papers as in the right order as I created them. So these are the background pages that I did. And as you know, as you saw in the demonstration, I did use this as a canvas, and I, colored the canvas with the crayons, and then I use a rolling pin to press this down and transfer the colors onto the paper. And as you can see, this when you use a rolling pin, it does transfer the color onto the back as well, so you get 2-for-1 deal with those. So that's the colored one, and then this is the more of the muted colors, the browns and a bit of charcoal color, and of course I used the roller again for that one, and here's another one, and I must have done that with my hand by the looks of it. This one here is very grungy looking, and I did that with the roller, as you can see. Those, and I didn't do as many of the chalk backgrounds as I did with the watercolor backgrounds. If you haven't seen that video where I did all these same techniques but using watercolors, which is in the previous video, I'll leave a link to that video. And this is a piece of tracing paper that I used, and it transferred the color to the back. And now we get on to, I'll move this one aside, to the chalk, to the mark making. So this one didn't really turn out, so I was going to delete this page, because it's not like being on the computer. You can't really delete the page, can you? So I think this is where I did the dots and squiggle lines, and it didn't really do much. But anyway, I'll put that aside. And here I think I recreated it where I did those dots on the page and some squiggle lines, and then I did a borders in the yellow chalk. So that's what that turned out like. I transferred it, and I don't know whether I patted that down by hand or not. This is the one where I did the leaves, and I created a funny design around the edges of the leaves. It got all these little lines, which was quite interesting, the way that turned out. And I sprayed that. One of the reasons is probably because I sprayed that with coffee dye as well. And this one is when I did it again, but this time I sprayed more, and I also sprayed, I dabbed some, you can still see on my finger, that powder, that gold powder on there, and then I sprayed coffee dye over the top of it. So that's how that turned out doing that technique. So that makes quite a pretty background page. And there you can see the coffee dye transferred to the back a bit. So here is where I tried to use the paintbrush to paint the word peace on here, but because I used the roller, I guess it disappeared. And this one I did again, but of course I painted it on the right way around, and when I transferred the image, of course it's back to front, so you can see it more. I took more time to take off that chalk paint, so it kind of worked, but as I said, it's back to front as usual. And of course this is where I painted those leaves. I just used the paintbrush and drew the outline of the leaves, and you can see it there. So that's that one. And then this is the second one I did, but I painted on with the chalks. I coloured on the green chalk and sprayed it, and then I used the paintbrush to do the negative impression of leaves. So that's that one. And so then that's number 4, that's 3, 4, and this is the last one that I did. You can see the outline of the leaves. So it's kind of like eco dyeing, but not quite. And then these 2 pages are what I used to mop up, and you can vaguely see there's some leaves there, but the rest, I think that might have been a leaf there, I don't know, but I could be just my imagination thinking they are. But this one's some interesting marks, no leaves, but left some interesting impressions when I mopped up the rest of those colours. So that's those. And then the last lot are the homemade stencils that we use, or I used. I don't know why I keep saying we. I used, because this is the first one, is the chalk curtain gauze, and you'll see it was very faint because I didn't spray it with very much water to start with. So that's the first one, and then I turned it over and then sprayed it again, and then did it again, and I got it darker this time. So that was my first attempt. And here's a couple of those little short pieces there that I did. And this is what was underneath. underneath the curtain gauze. So that's what the impression was left after spraying it so many times, a little bit darker. So this is the cotton weave. That's the effect of the cotton weave. So I quite like that. And then here's a couple of the smaller panels that I did with the cotton weave, with the colours, more colours in that. So, and then we get on to the curtain lace, the bottom of the curtain where there you have that lace pattern. So there's that one, and I think I sprayed that with a little bit of coffee, or maybe not, no, not that one. This one I sprayed with coffee, so it gives you a more muted colour, tones down those colours, and makes it a little bit more vintage looking. And this one here's got less of the red chalk in there. Use that, and I did spray it with coffee dye as well. And this one here, because I really like the vintage look of it, and you can see it's fading as I keep reapplying, transferring those images. And this one is where I sprayed a lot more coffee and just wanted to mop up the last of the colour on there. And here it gets really grungy. And coffee sprayed that as well. And then we go on to the Brayer Anglais. So these are the impressions that I got on here. I'm quite happy with those. And this is on coffee dye paper, as you can see from the back. And it did transfer some of the colour to the back. So that's quite pretty. And then we're on to when we use the felt placemat. So that's the impression you get. This is where maybe some of the pages that I did create I couldn't find, and I think maybe because I started using them before I did finish doing did this part of the film videoing, but I made sure I kept some of it anyway because I was too impatient before I finished doing this video. I wanted to use them. And there's the one with the coloured chalks that I used. It's quite pretty. And there's a one where I put the gold on there, that gold powder, and made a little bit of mess in places, but I don't mind because it makes a nice background page. And now we're back onto the non-stick mat, and I used all the colours just to see what it looked like, and I was quite impressed with that. It wasn't as glary as I thought it would be. So, and then I absolutely love this one with the placemat, that starburst pattern on the placemat. I think these are absolutely gorgeous, the way these turned out. I was very impressed. And also on the back. And this one, I love this one. I love them all really. Got a bit of impression on the back. And this is where I was just trying to use up all the colour, because you don't just get one sheet out of it. It will keep transferring until all the colours used up. This one I started on one side and I just moved the paper around, and then I did it, placed it down and rubbed it on one side, and I moved it up just to mop up as much of the colour off the stencil as possible. So that's why you got that kind of double starburst effect on there. And then of course the good old bubble wrap on here. And this one I did with a roller because it's got a shadow impression, and that was on coffee dye art paper. And this is the one where I used some coloured chalks on white copy paper, and this is not as colourful, on some journal, one of those planner books pages, and that's those. So that's all the pages that I created with using those three different methods of transferring colour onto your pages, using a canvas this work surface as a canvas. Before I finish, the one important aspect, detail that I hadn't shared with you in regard to using chalk on paper is that chalk is a powder when it dries, and it's not permanent. So to make it permanent and it doesn't rub off on your hands or anything else, I used some people will use Mod Podge to seal their papers, but I don't like using Mod Podge. So instead I use the paint matte varnish that you use for painted surfaces when you're painting. And this is just a Frenchville brand, but you can use any brand. Anything that says matte varnish or a sealant of any kind will do. And the thing I like about this over the Mod Podge anyway is because the Mod Podge tends to make your pages a little bit shiny, and I don't like that finish particularly. And so I'll show you, I did do some of these, and because now I can't find them. Oh, here's one. So I've already gone ahead and I have sealed some of these pages, and this is what the effect is. So you can see a tiny bit of shine, it's not too bad. And here's one that doesn't have that sealant on there, so you can see it's completely dull, flat. So that's so you don't really see a great amount of difference in those pages. That it seals it in, and the chalk won't transfer from there to your fingers. So that's my inked finger. It's permanently inked because I don't know why, but I'm always inking something, and that finger always gets, I use an ink brush, but anyway, not to worry. But yeah, this part doesn't come off on your hands, and I'll see if I can get some of this to come off on my hands to show you the difference. No, not really. So this I must have used a lot of watercolour. Some of them I can feel the chalk. This one should come off. There you go. You can see that my hands are black. Not my finger. The other fingers. That the chalk did transfer now that they're dry. So I'll clean my fingers off. So yes, as I said, it's very important to seal it if you don't want the colour to be transferring to everything and getting on your clothes and other places you don't want it to. So that's an important step to keep in mind when you're using chalks. In particular, the watercolours, not too bad. I've never really bothered sealing my watercolour pages. I've never seen them really transfer the colour anywhere in particular. So anyway, that's all I needed to tell you. So I hope you got something out of that today. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, because I'm full of ideas, and hopefully I'll bring them to you in the future tutorials. But for now, I want to wish everybody a happy crafty day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone.